When an experienced park ranger heard a heart-rending scream in the depths of the Canadian forest, he couldn't imagine that this sound would change his life. Ignoring all safety rules and common sense, he headed toward the terrifying sound, which grew louder and clearer. What he discovered in a small forest clearing made him drop his weapon and do something that no one had ever done before. John Mackenzie had been working as a ranger in the national park for 15 years. During these years, he had seen it all. Fights between predators, fawns being born, bird migrations, and even rare encounters with wolves. But nothing could have prepared him for what would happen on this cloudy October day. John was walking his usual route, carefully inspecting the area for signs of poaching activity. Suddenly, the forest silence was shattered by a sound that made his blood run cold. There was something almost human in this sound. Desperation, pain, and a plea for help. John stopped, listening for the direction of the sound. His years of experience told him to proceed with extreme caution. Moving forward, he began to notice signs of struggle on the ground, trampled grass, broken branches, drops of blood on leaves. The sounds became clearer, and soon John emerged into a small clearing. What he saw made his heart clench with both horror and compassion. On the ground lay a huge black bear, caught in several deadly traps at once. Its front paw was clamped in a steel trap, its neck caught in a snare, and its hind legs were entangled in barbed wire. With each movement, the wire dug deeper into the animal's flesh, causing a new wave of pain and despair. John's first instinctive move was to reach for his rifle, the standard reaction when encountering an injured bear. But something in the animal's eyes stopped him. They showed not aggression or fury, but deep pain, and it seemed, an understanding that this human might be its last hope for salvation. John knew that what he was about to do contradicted all safety protocols and common sense, but sometimes the heart proves wiser than reason. He slowly placed his rifle on the ground, demonstrating his peaceful intentions to the bear. The animal seemed to understand this gesture. Its growling subsided, though its tense gaze continued to follow every human movement. Approaching the bear, John began speaking in a quiet, soothing voice. He knew animals could sense fear and uncertainty, so he tried to project calm despite his frantically beating heart. First, he tackled the snare around the bear's neck, the most dangerous of the traps, which could strangle the animal with any careless movement. Each step required absolute concentration. One wrong move could provoke an attack from the injured predator, and then an unarmed human would have practically no chance of survival. But the bear seemed to understand what was happening. It remained motionless, only occasionally letting out quiet moans of pain. After freeing the bear's neck, John moved on to the barbed wire. The wounds from it looked particularly horrific. The wire had dug deep into the flesh, causing inflammation and bleeding. Every touch to the wounds caused the bear a new wave of pain, but it patiently endured its savior's manipulations. Freeing the paw from the trap proved most difficult. This trap was particularly cruel in design, with serrated edges that caused maximum damage during attempts to escape. John had to exert considerable effort to pry open the steel jaws of the trap without causing even more harm to the already injured paw. When the last trap was disabled, John stepped back, expecting the bear to immediately flee. But the animal remained lying there, clearly exhausted from days of fighting for its life. An attempt to stand ended in a fall after a few uncertain steps. It became obvious that without professional help, the bear wouldn't survive. Taking out his phone, John contacted the nearest wildlife clinic. His voice trembled with worry as he described the situation and requested urgent assistance. Waiting for help seemed like an eternity. Each minute could be crucial for the bear's survival. The arrival of the veterinary team marked the beginning of a new chapter in this unusual story. The professionals were amazed not only by the bear's condition, but also by the fact that it had allowed a human to help it. After administering tranquilizers, the team was able to conduct an initial examination right there. The diagnosis was grim. Beyond multiple wounds and infection, there was a risk of losing a limb without urgent surgical intervention. Transporting the injured predator to the clinic became a separate challenge. It took special skill to load the massive body into specialized transport without causing additional trauma. Throughout this time, John remained nearby, as if feeling a special responsibility for the fate of this unusual patient. At the clinic, the bear received all necessary care, complex surgery, wound treatment, powerful antibiotics, but during treatment, something disturbing came to light. This case wasn't isolated. Over recent weeks, several similar incidents involving wild animals caught in poachers' traps had been recorded in the area. This information deeply affected John. He couldn't accept the thought that somewhere out there in the forest, other animals might be suffering just like this bear. While the animal recovered in the clinic, John began his own investigation. He set up hidden cameras in places where poachers were suspected to operate, studied tracks, and gathered information from local residents. His efforts paid off. One night, one of his surveillance cameras was triggered. Despite the late hour and danger, John immediately headed into the forest. His pursuit led to an unexpected confrontation with a poacher who was just setting up a new trap. After a brief struggle, John managed to detain the criminal until police arrived. The subsequent investigation revealed an entire illegal hunting network in the region. Thanks to the detainee's confession, authorities were able to discover and disarm dozens of deadly traps, thereby saving many potential victims. By this time, the bear had recovered enough to return to the wild. Release day was emotional for everyone involved in this unusual story. John personally participated in transporting the bear deep into the forest, away from human trails and known poaching routes. The moment of the bear's release became the culmination of the entire story. When the transport cage door opened, the animal didn't immediately bolt. Instead, it slowly walked out, stopped a few meters away, and turned around as if saying goodbye to its rescuers. In its gaze was something hard to describe in words, perhaps gratitude or perhaps silent acknowledgement of the unusual bond that had formed between human and beast in the moment of their first encounter. This story became a turning point not only for John but for the entire local community. It sparked a wave of initiatives to protect wildlife and strengthen measures against poaching. Local authorities increased funding for nature conservation programs and toughened penalties for illegal hunting. And somewhere in the depths of the Canadian forests, a black bear still roams, whose encounter with a human proved that true courage lies not in displaying strength, but in the ability to show mercy even in the most dangerous situations.